Good morning, all. Finally, I am really tired. Um, as some of you may already have heard, I took my mom to the ER last night. She had gotten, well, I'll talk about that afterwards. She's fine now. She's home, but I'll talk more about it afterwards. That way, people who don't want to hear it can just hear the read. So let me read chapter 7 of Shepherd's Quest, book 1 of the Broken Key trilogy. A little background here. Riyan, Chad, and Bart headed into the hills to get out of town because Chad messed up using a scroll and ruined his father's grinding wheels at the mill, and his father had kicked him out. So there's some tension going on there. So they thought it best to get out of town for a little bit. Also to get Riyan away from Rupert, who has it in for him. So Riyan, of course, earlier had discovered an underground tunnel system. Didn't know where it led, but he did find a single copper coin of ancient design there. So he's thinking treasure, blah blah blah, stuff. So that's where they're headed. So chapter 7 with commentary, possible spoilers. It took the entire morning and better part of the afternoon before Riyan found the clearing where he had rescued Blackface and found the coin. It was surprising how many different areas in these hills looked exactly the same. After finding the area 3 times, the others wondered if he would ever be able to locate it. He knew he finally found it when he crossed a stream and saw a mass of berry vines that had an area of the outer fringe cut back. "There it is," he said as he led them toward the opening. Coming to a stop before the hole in the ground, he turned back to the others and grinned. "That's it?" Bart asked. Staring down into the black hole, he said, "Doesn't look like much." "Maybe not from up here," Riyan replied, "but at the bottom is a passage that moves off to the right and left." "What are we waiting for?" asked Chad. He unslung his backpack and laid it on the ground a little bit away from the opening. "Shouldn't leave our equipment out here in the open," Bart said. "We wouldn't want a wild animal taking off with something." When the other two turned toward him, he added, "Our packs are full of food." Seeing the wisdom of what he said, Chad picked up his pack. Riyan moved to the edge of the opening. He then sat on the edge with his legs extended within. While visions of chests, crypts, and untold wealth ran through his mind, he scooted into the opening. The other two watched as he disappeared into darkness. I had the hole, but I think darkness sounds a little bit cooler. A couple seconds later, they heard him holler, "Come on down!" Chad glanced at Bart, who grinned. "You first," he offered. "All right," Bart agreed, who cautiously approached and entered the hole. Once he had slid to the bottom, he found Riyan working to get the lantern lit. By the time the wick caught and was illuminating the passage, Chad had joined them. With the lantern in one hand, Riyan moved down the passage to the right until he reached the spot where he had found the coin. Turning back to the others, he pointed to the floor. "That's where I found the coin," he said. The lantern's light revealed his footprints from his earlier time down there. Bart nodded and then looked closely at the wall. They showed the unmistakable signs of human construction. "This place is old," he observed. "How old do you think?" Chad asked. "I don't know," he replied. "But given that none of us are familiar with the markings on the coin, I doubt if anyone's been down here for several hundred years." Then he glanced at Chad. "Maybe longer." "There could be anything down here," exclaimed Riyan. "True," Bart agreed, "but I would advise caution. There's no telling what safeguards the previous occupants could have put into place." "You mean traps?" Chad asked. Bart nodded. "Exactly." A worried look came over Chad as he glanced toward the floor of the passage leading away. "Don't worry," said Bart. "I doubt if there would be anything in the middle of the passage." "But let's be careful anyway," Riyan added. Taking the lead, he moved down the passage to the right. They didn't soon... Okay, this sounds just terrible. I don't know how I left it here, but it says, "They didn't soon came to where another." It's funny how sometimes you put stuff in and it just reads right. I don't know, I guess my mind, yeah. All right, so I'm going to remove "didn't." And now it's, "They soon came to where another, narrower passage branched off to their left. When they reached it, they found that it curved back around farther to the left." Riyan brought them to a halt and glanced back at the others. "Which way?" he asked, the excitement of the moment making him almost giddy. Take the smaller passage to the left, suggested Chad. It's narrow, so may not be a main passage. Nodding, Riyan entered the new passage. Barely wide enough for a grown man to pass without scraping his shoulders, it continued to curve back around to the left until it was running parallel to the passage they had just left. As the passage finished the curve and straightened out, they saw where it extended at an open entryway leading into what had to be a room. In his excitement, Riyan hurried to the entryway and passed through to the other side. The room he found himself in was only about 15 feet by 10. A stone sarcophagus sat in the center of the room, indicating they were in a burial chamber. The walls were plain, unadorned stone similar to that which was used in lining the passages. Wow, Riyan breathed under his breath as he came to stand next to the sarcophagus. He ran his hand across the top as he took in the ancient inscriptions engraved within the stone. We must be in an ancient catacomb, Chad observed, eyes lighting up. They often bury gold and jewels with the dead. Bart nodded. Let's get it open, he said, indicating the sarcophagus. Do you think that's wise? Asked Riyan. I mean, stealing from the dead is supposed to be bad luck. Shrugging, Bart said. It's up to you. We can always come back if there's nothing else down here. Yeah, agreed Riyan. That might be a better idea. If there was a chest or something in the room with it, that's one thing. But to take something from the dead itself? A shiver, of course, threw him at the very thought. Then let's go find something else, urged Chad. Wait a second, Bart said, as something caught his eye from the other side of the sarcophagus. He moved around the sarcophagus and reached down to pick up another of the coins. He grinned as he held it up for the others to see. It's exactly like the other I found, Riyan exclaimed. Yes, it is, nodded Bart. He put it in his pouch and then indicated for Riyan to lead the way from the room. Once they passed through the narrow passage and were back in the main one, he turned and continued down the way they had previously been heading. It wasn't long before the passage they were following ended at a T-junction. Riyan paused momentarily to shine the light from the lantern down to the left, then to the right. Both directions extended beyond the light's reach. Riyan decided to take the right. The new passage was exactly like the one they had just left, and it too ended in a T-junction not too far down. This time, however, the passages to the right and left were narrower, just as a curving passage leading to the room where the sarcophagus had been. Again, he chose the right and hurried along. The narrow passage extended straight ahead for a short span, then turned abruptly to the right. As Riyan turned the corner, he saw an entryway to another burial chamber. Moving forward, he passed through into the room and gasped. No sarcophagus within this room. Rather, within the walls and the right-left sides of the room were stone biers. Laid out upon each of the stone biers was a corpse. Both were dressed in armor, yet time had reduced the armor to nothing more than rust. Skeletal faces looked out from within the helms they wore. But it wasn't the sight of the dead that made Riyan gasp. Rather, it was a chest that sat on the floor beneath each of them. Oh, man, he said with renewed excitement. Moving forward to the chest on the right, he set the lantern down as he gripped the lid. But try as he might, he couldn't get it open. The lid wouldn't budge. Behind him, Chad was trying the other chest, only to find that he was having similar trouble opening his. Riyan looked up disappointed and said, It's locked. So is this one, Chad said. Bart took off his pack and set it on the floor. He opened it and pulled out a rolled piece of leather. Holding it up, he glanced to Riyan and grinned. I may be able to just do something about that. Leaving his pack on the ground, he carried the rolled piece of leather and moved to the chest where he knelt before it. He then untied the thong securing the piece of leather and set it on the ground next to the chest. Riyan watched as he unrolled it. Within were small tools ranging in size from 2 to 4 inches in length. What are you going to do with those, he asked. You've never seen lockpicks? Bart asked. No, replied Riyan. Can't you be arrested for just having them in your possession? Asked Chad. So I've heard, he replied. Taking out 2 of the tools, he inserted their tips within the lock and began working the tumblers inside. After a few moments, he felt the click that always accompanied the unlocking of the lock. He then replaced the tools in the rolled leather before taking hold of the lid and opening it. Inside was what had to have once been several weapons, but were now nothing more than piles of rust. Riyan held the lantern close to better see the interior in the hopes of being there. After sifting through the rusty remains, they came up with nothing. Now, more than likely, at some point, I'm going to get a reader who's really into metallurgy and stuff like that, and he's going to say, those weapons could not have turned into rust in that chest. Blah, blah, blah. Well, no, maybe. And I get dinged all the time for not doing my research. but I don't have time to research everything. So some people are just going to have to understand. Yeah, I can't research how to deal with horses, and I can't research the metallurgical effect of time and damp. Anyway, you get my drift. Okay, inside the chest were the rest of the remains of weapons, similar to the ones that had been in the first chest. But this time, there were several stacks of coins similar to the ones they had found earlier. See, yeah, similar to the ones and similar to the two coins. I got similar to in two sentences back to back. I just can't do that. Inside the chest were the rest of the remains of weapons, like those. Ooh, like those. There we go. Like those that had been in the first chest. There we go. But this time there were several stacks of coins similar to the two they had already found. I just think it flows better. There must, if you think I'm wrong, let me know. There must be 20 or more, Riyan exclaimed excitedly. After pulling them out and counting them, they discovered there were 24. Riyan divided them among himself and the others. Each put 8 coins in their packs. Wonder how much they're worth, Chad asked as they were leaving the tomb. If you consider just the copper used in making them, not much, explained Bart. But due to their age, certain people would be willing to pay more for them. Of course, having a father who's a thief, apparently, because he got the lockpicks from his father, that he would know about such things. You know, he knows all about fences, and I don't mean the ones that keep in cattle. Excellent! Riyan gave them all a gram as they returned to the T-junction. He then crossed over to the other narrow passage and began making his way through. After going straight for a short span, the passage turns back to the left, and they came into another tomb with 2 biers, one on each side of the room. Now, for those who don't know, bier is a stone bed, so to speak, that you lay out the dead on. That's all that is. So when I say biers, it just means they're, it's about 6 foot long, 3 feet wide, maybe 2 feet, maybe 3 feet off the ground. Okay. Just as in the previous room, the dead were arrayed in rusted armor, and a chest sat on the floor beneath them. Again, the chests were locked, and Bart used his lockpicks to get them open. Between the 2 chests, they found 30 of the copper coins and 2 small gems among the rest of the remains of ancient weapons. They got quite excited about the gems until Bart explained they were rather common and wouldn't bring much gold. Riyan didn't care. He was having the time of his life, and I would too. Man, if I found something like this, gold or no gold, I would just love to explore it. They left the room and returned to the T-junction, where they turned and followed the wider passage back to the way they came. Once they returned to the first T-junction of the 2 main passages, they continued on past the passage, leading back to the hole out to the surface. They came to another T-junction with 2 narrow passages leading right and left to 2 more crypts. These also held 2 stone biers upon which the dead were laid out, with matching chests below. The first room of the new pair yielded 18 of the coins. Riyan was slightly disappointed at not finding more. You can't expect more treasure with each room we've come to. I'm surprised to have found what we already have. Yeah, in my books there are no Monty Hall dungeons. Is that term even used anymore? But yeah. Now, when I was initially role playing, I loved Monty Hall dungeons. I always used the Ardum Gamor to roll for special abilities on my characters. And for a fighter, I rolled double out and got a Storm Giant. So I had this Storm Giant fighter, and at some point he acquired a laser rifle. So I had a Storm Giant fighter with a laser rifle. He kicked butt pretty good. Okay. Frankly, I'm surprised to have found what we already have. I know, replied Riyan. They left the room behind and went to check out the other room on the other side of the T. When Bart went to pick the lock of the first chest, he paused. What? Asked Chad. Bart tapped an area near the lock. It had a marking on it that didn't blend in perfectly with the overall design of the chest. I didn't see this on the other one, he explained. Ryan moved the lantern closer and saw what looked to him little more than scratches. So, he asked, "This may indicate a trap of some kind," he said as he turned to glance up at them. "Why would you think that?" asked Chad. "Just something my father told me one time," he replied. "You see, chests such as these that are trapped often have some marking on them telling the owner what kind of trap it holds." "That's stupid," scorned Chad. "I mean, wouldn't that give a thief an idea that something is not right?" "Yes," agreed Bart. "But most chest makers who specialize in traps always put an unobtrusive mark on it so they'll know what it is and how to disarm it. Just because I know it's there doesn't mean I can disarm it." "But why would they do that?" Ryan asked. Sighing, Bart stood up and turned toward them. "Suppose you commissioned a chest for a specific person and with a specific type of trap. And suppose further that once you got it home, you accidentally closed the lid and locked it before whatever you wanted to put in it was inside. How are you going to get it back open?" "I would think the chest maker would have given the owner instructions on how to open it," said Chad. "Oh, they do," agreed Bart. "But there are stupid people out there who forget, lose instructions, etc. So, chest makers put markings on each chest that holds a trap, so if they are called out to open a trapped chest, they will be able to do so." "I guess that makes sense," said Ryan. "How do you know so much about this?" Ryan gave him a look, shook his head, or Bart gave him a look, shook his head as he rolled his eyes and then knelt back down in front of the chest. "He's got lockpicks," Ryan informed his friend. "Who has lockpicks?" "Thieves," replied Chad. "Or sons of thieves," added Bart. "Now be quiet and let me work on this. You two may wish to wait out in the passage just in case something goes wrong." Now, this was another thing that always bothered me about role-playing games and, like in Skyrim. Yeah, there's traps, but see, my mind always goes with what then? Like, okay, well, why would they have this trap in the first place? How would the owner know how to disarm it? And if, like, some dungeons in Skyrim have hundreds of chests, how would you? And they're all have different traps, right? So how would the owner know which chest is which and how to disarm which trap? So there has to be something on the chest to indicate that. And of course, thieves would know that. Now, they may not know what the markings mean, because I'm sure every individual chest maker would have their own specific set of markings to denote traps. But once you learn what that marking is, and you've disarmed it once, then the next time should be a piece of cake. So yeah, so that always bugged me. And of course, when I did this, my first real dungeon thing, I had to explore that. So yeah, I never just take anything as face scan. I always have to know why and wherefores of everything. It drives my girlfriend crazy, but that's me. That's what makes me special. Ryan nodded for Chad to join him as they moved out of the room and waited at the entryway. They watched as Bart first examined the outside of the chest very closely before scrutinizing the area around the lock. After a few tense moments, Bart placed the tips of his thumbs on either side of the keyhole and pressed. Then he turned to them and grinned. "I got it." The other two hurried back into the room and saw a needle protruding from the keyhole. "It was a prick of poison, as my father would call it," he explained. "It's designed to prick the finger of the thief and deliver a poison of some kind. Some poisons become ineffective over time, while others grow more potent." "Is it unlocked?" Chad asked. Bart shook his head. "Not yet." Turning back to the chest, he removed the same two tools he used on the previous chests from his lockpicks and very carefully began working around the needle. Once he had the lock picked, he opened it. Ryan moved closer to see what treasure may be inside. "You've got to be kidding," he exclaimed when he saw the usual fare of wrestle weapons and a scattering of the coins. "What's the point of putting a trap on this garbage?" "Vanity, maybe," replied Bart. "Or it could have been for some other reason. Who knows? Seems a waste of time to trap this sort of stuff." Chad agreed with Ryan. Ryan knelt in front of the chest and said, "Maybe there's a secret compartment lying at the bottom or top." Bart moved aside and then collected his lockpicks as he went to work on the other chest. Running his fingers along the inside, Ryan hunted for anything that might indicate something was hidden. Remembering a tale told by a bard about some treasure hunters, he tapped the bottom of the chest and the top. After several minutes of fruitless searching, he was unable to find anything. 10 coins, he exclaimed as he located them. 10 lousy coins. Isn't that the way of humans? I mean, When he found initially the one coin, oh, excitement. He was thrilled beyond measure. Then he found, 18, and he found 24, and now he's back to 10. What a waste. It's better than nothing, offered Chad. Riyan glared at him, then came to his senses. You're right, he said. It's just that I was accepting a bit more expensive, his friend finished for him. Something like that, yeah, Riyan nodded with a sheepish grin. Just then, Bart raised the lid of the other chest. More coins, he told him. He did a quick count and said, 23. Every little bit helps, Chad said when he saw the disappointment in his friend's eye. This kind of reminds me of Jacobs, he in the Adventurers Guild. Yeah, Jacobs wants the big stuff. He wants the flashy stuff. I mean, Riyan may not want the best and flashiest, but he like to see steady improvement here. Let's go from copper to silver to gold to platinum and so forth. Maybe throwing a wand or a magic sword too would be all right. Bart collected the coins and stood up. You may have unrealistic expectations about this place, he said as he turned back toward Riyan. Judging by the construction and the state of the dead, I would guess that finding something worth real gold is unlikely. Exactly, agreed Chad. Let's hope we find at least enough so I can help my father with the new grinding wheels. Riyan gave him a grin and laid his hand on his shoulder. You got it, he said. At the very least, we're living the dream of being treasure hunters. Just like the Sagas. Agreed Chad with a grin of his own. Onward, fearless treasure hunters, Riyan exclaimed. Then the three friends broke into laughter. They left the crypt and returned back the way they came until they reached the T with the main passage leading down to where they entered the place. Pack's getting heavy, Chad said. You've only got about 30 coins in there, Bart told him. If it gets too heavy, you can give me some of yours. That's okay, Chad assured him. I'm sure I'll manage. Riyan laughed. They left the T behind them and headed down the passage back toward the hole in the ceiling through which they entered. When they passed the curving narrow passage that led to the sarcophagus, they knew they were almost there. Okay, now, people are saying, man, that's so confusing. The T's and the rights and the left, going back to the T junction. Well, you got the hole in the ceiling, and that's the central point of location. And then the rest of it is like T junction, left, right, more T junctions, and then this passage goes to this passage goes to this passage. It was really quite difficult to write this to where it made some kind of sense. I wanted to give the sense of a labyrinth, of a maze, of being not really sure, lost, stuff like that. And I think I did a good job of that. Maybe too good a job. I had a map written out of all this stuff back in the day when I wrote this, but I think it's in storage, so I don't have it with me now. But I'm sure there's more than one person out there who's gotten a piece of paper out and drawn out the rights, the lefts, made notes. This was found here, this was found here, this was found here. I did. Like Bard's Tale. You remember Bard's Tale? Oh, I hated the dark areas. And the spinners, oh, I would curse a blue streak when I entered a dark area with a spinner. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you're probably not my age. Then Bart all of a sudden came to an abrupt halt. The other two who were walking behind him stopped as well. What? Asked Chad. Bart pointed. I have he, but that might be confusing. So I'm going to change that to Bart. Bart pointed down the passage ahead of them, and in a quick down the passage ahead. I don't need ahead of them because that's implied. And in a quiet whisper said, "Look." When the other two looked down the passageway to where he indicated, 2 red dots could be seen. They looked for all the world like a pair of eyes, and they were staring right at them. Light filtering down from outside showed them the hole in the ceiling and the way out. Unfortunately, it was closer to the red eyes than it was to them. Back up slowly, Bart said as he began walking backward. Riyan and Chad both started moving backward as well when a god-awful roar reverberated through the passage. "Run!" yelled Bart as he turned around to flee. Behind them, they could hear the grunting of a large animal as it thundered towards them. When the lantern's light revealed the curving passage coming up to their left, Chad got an idea and said, "Into the passage!" Leading the others, he raced into it and followed it quickly to the room with the sarcophagus. "Help me with the lid," he replied. Moving to the sarcophagus, he gripped the lid and waited for the others to come help. "I can't do it by myself," he told them. "We can block the entryway with it." Getting the idea, Ryan and Bart each came and took hold of an edge. Then, giving out with groans and strains, they lifted the heavy stone lid up and off the sarcophagus. "Man, this is heavy," gasped Ryan. From the narrow passage outside the room, they heard the growls of the beast as it worked its way toward them. "Hurry!" Chad exclaimed. Once the end of the lid nearest the entryway was right past the edge of the sarcophagus, they rested the lid on the edge and slid the rest of the way to the floor. Out in the passage, the red eyes of the beast were now visible as it rounded the curve. The sheer size of the creature hampered it as it tried to navigate through the narrow way. It was wedged in on both sides and had to push its bulk through to get to them. They worked the lid closer to the entryway. When it was within inches, they lifted the other end and set it against the top of the opening. "Now what?" asked Bart. "I don't know." "I don't know," replied Chad. "My plan only went as far as blocking off the room." Ryan glanced to the body that I have was lying, but I'm going to change that to laid. Ryan glanced at the body that laid within the sarcophagus. A sword rested along the top of the body, its hilt clasped in the corpse's skeletal hands. Perhaps it was the fact that it had been within a sealed sarcophagus, but the metal looked to have withstood the passage of time. Bam! The creature struck the other side of the lid where it blocked the entryway, almost knocking the lid back into the room. Chad and Bart put their shoulders against it to keep it upright. Bam! Again, the creature struck the lid. This time a small piece of it broke off. "It's not going to withstand another blow like that for much longer," Chad exclaimed. "Oh yeah, this was a good idea," said Bart rather sarcastically. "There was no other place to go," insisted Chad. Then he glanced back at where Ryan was bent over the sarcophagus. "Ryan, we can use your help right about now." "Just a second," replied Ryan. He gripped the hands of the corpse and was in the midst of trying to remove them from the hilt of the sword. Once he had the hilt free, he grabbed it and tried to lift it out with one hand. When he could barely move it, he used both hands and struggled to get it out. The sword was massive, what you would call a two-handed sword. It took all of his strength simply to raise it and carry it toward the entryway. "Careful with that," Bart shouted when the edge of the sword came close and almost struck him. Ryan took the sword and moved to face the gap between the lid and the entryway. He saw the forepaw of the creature poke through for a moment before it withdrew. "I think it's a mountain bear," he told the others. "Great," replied Bart. "Now kill it." Ryan lifted the sword until it was parallel with the ground. Then he aimed it at the gap between the lid and the entryway. He gave out with a cry and ran forward. At the same time, he thrust the sword through the gap. His forward momentum was abruptly halted as the point of the sword struck flesh. The beast roared in pain as the sword sank into its flesh. Whatever part of the body that had been struck... Sorry, I know. I shouldn't pause at this moment, but I am. Come on. There you go. Had been struck, suddenly jerked, and Ryan almost lost his grip on the hilt. But he yanked back quickly and retained the sword. The blade was stained red 6 inches from the tip. From the other side of the lid, the beast had grown quiet. "I got it," replied Ryan as he showed the others the sword. "But whether you killed it or not remains to be seen," Bart stated. They listened for a few seconds and could only hear muted breathing from the other side. Ryan propped the sword against the wall a foot down from the entryway as its weight made it difficult to hold. "It isn't dead," Chad finally said as the sound of the beast breathing from the other side continued. "Ryan," Bart whispered, "take a look." He then indicated the gap between the lid and the entryway through which Ryan had struck the creature. "All right," he agreed. Leaving the sword where it was, he grabbed the lantern and moved toward the crack. The crack itself wasn't all that big, as the base of the lid was only 6 inches from the base of the entryway. Now that he took a good look at it, he's surprised that he was even able to hit the creature through it. He moved closer and even got down on his knees to better peer through to the other side. Chad and Bart maintained their position against the sarcophagus's lid should the creature again try to bolt its way in. At the base of the entryway was a small red liquid pool. "It's lost some blood." Peering through with the lantern next to him, he tried to locate the creature. After a minute of looking, he backed away and said, "I can't really see anything." Try striking it with the sword again, Bart said. If it's close enough, you might hit it. But that might make it mad, Chad said. Bart glanced at Chad. Do you want to stay down here forever? He waited for him to shake his head. No, then added, it's that, or remove the left side. Chad turned to Ryan and said, you better try the sword. Ryan nodded. He didn't relish the idea of removing the protection of the stone lid. So, taking up the sword again, he did just as he had the first time. He aimed the point of the sword for the crack and with a cry, thrust hard. The blade slid through the crack and failed to hit anything. I guess we're going to have to move the lid aside to see, he said after the failed attempt. Bart nodded. Stand ready, he told Ryan. Then to Chad he said, we'll pull it back a little ways, but be ready should the beast move to attack again. When Chad acknowledged the plan, Bart glanced to Ryan. Ready? Ryan raised his sword and nodded. Easy now, Bart told Chad. With great care, they slowly moved the sarcophagus lid away from the entryway. Sweat beaded his forehead as Ryan watched the gap between lid and entryway increase. He expected at any minute for the beast to launch another assault, and as the lid inched its way farther back, his apprehension grew. They finally had to move the lid far enough for Ryan to see the creature lying just on the other side. The rise and fall of its back told him that it still lived. It's right on the other side, he whispered to the other two. Can you get at it? Asked Chad. I think so, Ryan replied. Raising the sword, he drove it forward, and the point struck the creature in the side. The creature gave out with a grunt. Well? Asked Chad. I hit it, but it didn't move, he replied. It's not doing anything, Bart asked. Ryan left the sword in the creature's body. He turned to his friends and shook his head. Bart indicated to Chad that they should move the lid to the side. Once it was out of the way, they looked to the creature and found that it was indeed one of the large mountain bears common to this region. The sword stuck out of its side, and blood continued to pump with every beat of its heart. Why doesn't it attack? Asked Chad. Bart moved closer and saw blood welling from just behind its head. I think your first blow took it in the spine, he said. Then he saw the eyes of the beast upon him, and he took a quick step backward. When the bear made no move to attack, he knew that the bear's spinal column had been severed. He turned to the others. We need to put it out of its misery. You two do it, Ryan said. His arms and legs were shaky from the earlier attacks. The weight of the sword plus the adrenaline rush that was wearing off had sapped his strength. Bart nodded and grasped the hilt of the sword in both hands. Pulling it out of the bear's side, he raised it high over his head. Using every ounce of strength he had, he thrust it into the bear. He was rather surprised that he managed to sink half of the blade into it before the tip hit bone and stopped. That had to do it, said Chad. They watched the size of the bear continue to go in and out as it breathed. Then the frequency of its breath slowed, and then until they stopped altogether. Maybe we should get out of here and make camp for the night, suggested Ryan. I, for one, could use some rest. Might not be a bad idea, agreed Chad. I'm getting hungry. Bart pulled out his knife and began carving off a hunk of the bear for their dinner. Ryan stopped him before he could cut very deep. Wait to do that until we're on the other side, he said. It's going to be bad enough as it is. He stopped carving when he realized what Ryan was talking about. Yeah, I got to change it. Change that to Ryan. Ryan was talking about. The bear's body completely blocked the lower half of the entryway, and most of it was already covered in blood. Then he laughed. He's not sure why, but he started laughing, and it wasn't long before Ryan and Chad joined him. They worked their way over the bear's carcass, and once on the other side, Bart carved out a chunk of meat. He carried it as he followed the other two down the narrow curving passage and back to the main passage. Then it was just down a little ways until they reached the opening leading to the surface. Look, Ryan said when they came to the slope leading up. They could see the tracks the bear had made as it came down the slope. Wonder what it was doing in here. Maybe looking for a den, suggested Bart. Or dinner, added Chad. I just hope there's not another one out there, Ryan said as he headed up the slope. The sun had already dipped past the tops of the mountains to the west. They got a fire going, and once Ryan had a spit put together to roast the meat, they went down to the stream and washed the blood off. That night, as they sat around the fire, they talked about what they had found down below, the bear attack, and what they may possibly find in the morning. That ends chapter 7. So it's getting good. They're in the underground catacomb, I guess for lack of a better word. And yeah, so they've already had one battle. They've won. They found some coins. Bart's explained the mysteries of being a thief. You know, traps, chests, and I've always thought that was fascinating. I never thought they really went that much into it, like in Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, sure, it was a trap chest, but Somebody had to make it. It had to be maintained. And what happens if it closes and the person who bought it dies, and then someone else wants it open, and they can't unlock it, right? But I don't know why people put 7 trap chests anyway. I mean that's just stupid. Well, I guess not. Anyway, so we'll do chapter 8 tomorrow. Now, okay, I believe I'm done talking about the book. So if you don't want to hear about my personal journey to the ER last night, then go ahead and stop it. Well, yesterday morning, I took my mom to the dentist. She was going to have 3 teeth extracted. Now, keep in mind, she's 81 years old. For the most part, she's in really good health. She still gets around. She can still drive. She can walk around the properties. She still gets around. She's a little slow, a little unbalanced now and then, but she's never fallen. So everything's good. So I took her to the dentist, and she got her 3 teeth extracted. We were done by 11 o'clock. We were heading home at 11 o'clock. Well, I went and got my son from work. I brought him home. And then at 8 o'clock last night, he comes, Dad, Grandma needs you. So I go out there, and she's still spitting blood. I mean, just spitting blood. She's got it's just nasty. And she's getting weaker. She took her blood pressure, and it read like 86 over 55 or something like that. So it's never been that low. So I took her to the ER. We drove to Paris, Texas, which was an hour away. We could have went to Hugo, but my possible future son-in-law, Travis, who is an administrator of a new hospital that just opened up in Ardmore, Oklahoma, he said, don't go to Hugo. And I was thinking maybe Durham. He says, go to Paris. Paris is the best one. Paris Regional Hospital. You want that one. And so I got her in the car. Of course, she's 81 years old, right? So, and female. So we had to make sure all the lights were out in the house. We had to get stuff together. We had to feed the cat. We had to do this. I mean, it took a half hour to get this woman out the door in order to go to the hospital. In fact, she had this whole list that years ago her and her husband Ralph had created. So if they were ever going to go to the hospital for an extended stay, this is all the stuff that they would require. And I'm like, this thing is just like that, 2 columns. And I'm like going, we ain't got time. We got to get to the hospital. If we need it, I'll come back for it. And I finally convinced her that we were not going to spend the next hour and a half compiling this pile of supplies. So I get her in the car and we drive down there. Drive down went fine. I get her there, and I walk in to get a wheelchair. She's out there spitting blood because we took a garbage can with us. And then we got into the ER about 9, maybe about 9:15. And I walked in there to get a wheelchair to bring her in, and nurse, asked me if I needed help. I said yes. And so I came back. She came with me back to the car. Now I'm thinking Friday night, 9 o'clock, right? Having spent time in Seattle having spent 25 years in Seattle, and I have been to many ERs with my ex-wife. Oh man, she loved it. She loved going to the ER or hypochondria. I don't know what, but anyway. And back, in Seattle, if you go to the ER on Friday night at 9 o'clock, expect 3 hours until you can be seen, right? So I'm thinking, man, we'll never get out of here tonight. Well, we walk in. So I go in there, and when they said, hey, you need help? I said, yes. So immediately I got hold of somebody, and I started talking about blood pressure, spitting blood, trying to make it sound as bad as possible so they'll take her right back. And they did. Because when they got her out of the car and was heading into the hospital, the nurse says, she's passing out. I don't think she was. I think she was more like just really tired and probably closed her eyes. But hey, if you want to think there's passing out, and that will get us into a room now, hey, she's passing out, and she's about ready to die. Oh, speaking about ready to die, so when we're here, back at the house before we left, as I'm taking, getting my mom ready to go, my son comes to me and says, "Is this the end? Like, is she gonna die, right?" I says, "Joseph, this is not the end. Okay, she's got a little loss of blood, maybe. She's tired, she's weak, but they'll be fine. This is not the end." Yeah, my son. He when I turned 50, he said, in all seriousness, "Does that mean you got one foot in the grave?" He has never lived that one down. I still bring that up. Anyway, so I said, no. So, okay. So at the hospital, we're in the back, and they're doing her checks, and the blood pressure actually had gone up a little bit. And they finally get her back to her room, and we're there for a long time. Basically, they gave her some Zofran for nausea, because they were going to put this ZTX or something like that on a gauze and have her bite down on the open sockets. And that ZTX, I don't even know if that sounds right. It was 3 initials, and I know there's a Z and an X in there somewhere. But they're going to bite down, put it on the gauze, put it on the tooth, bite down on it for about 15, 20 minutes, and then that stuff would help coagulate, and that worked fine. After that, she was better. She stopped spitting blood, and about 11:30. No, 11:30. 12. About 12 o'clock, she comes in and says, "Okay, your test results came back. They're all good. Your hemoglobin is where it should be. Platelets, everything looks fine. So we're going to send you home, but we're going to put this IV. We're going to do a saline IV because you've lost a lot of fluids." And so they suck it in her arm and drip, right? Well, they don't. There's one little bit of information they failed to, either they didn't tell us, or they failed to convey it in such a way that we registered it and retained it. Anyway, if you have your arm out straight, the IV goes drip. But if you go like this, it stops, right? So we're like, about 35 minutes after its IV started, I look up at the IV one. It's barely halfway, if even halfway, right? And it's going like drip, or even slower. And I'm like, "Oh man, it's gonna take forever." And so I messaged my daughter and says, "How long does an IV take? I don't remember it taking this long." And she says, "Well, it's only take 10 to 30 minutes." Well, it's been 35, right? And it's less than half empty. And so I go out there and I say, "Hey man, there's something wrong with that bag, because it's not dripping, right?" And she comes in and she explains that my mom had been texting, so her elbow had been bent, so that had caused it to stop flowing. And she said, and then when she told my mom to open up her arm, I would go, but they didn't explain that to us, or at least I didn't register it. So 15 minutes later, bag's empty. I'm ready to go. It's about 12:45, 12:50. I go out there, and they said, "That'll get, waiting on paperwork." We waited for a while for that stupid paperwork. And I said, "Well, it's Friday night. Doctor's busy. It takes a while to do everything." And intellectually, I understand. I do understand that they're busy. I understand that they can't get to things right away. But I'm tired. I'm hungry. And the chair they gave me was making my butt numb. I've been sitting in it for what? We got there at 9. I've been sitting on that chair for 3 hours. And I just want to go home. Everyone I'm talking to on the phone is gone to sleep, so I got nothing to do. I'm hungry. I'm tired. And I got an hour drive to get home, and I just want to go. So I'm getting impatient. But I'm normally very patient, and I didn't take it out on them, 'cause I understood their situation. And I'd rather the doctor save someone's life than get me out of there. So I waited. I was impatient in my head. I'm sure my stress level went up too. But that was fine. And eventually she came in and sent us home. Well, on the way home, I've been up. It's like, okay, it's 1 o'clock in the morning right now. We left around 1 o'clock. And I have been up since 4 o'clock a.m. So I've been up 21 hours. And I still got an hour drive to go. And I'm tired. I'm really tired. I spent over 2 hours mowing the lawn today. Push mower, not a riding mower, push mower. I sweated. I was exhausted, and I was hungry. But if you live in a big town, finding food at 1 a.m. in the morning is not a problem. But when you're in, I guess northern Texas, it's a fairly good sized town, but I'm sure there was a couple of restaurants I could have found something at, but there was nothing between the hospital and home, and I did not want to go this way or this way when my destination was this way, right? So I ended up just bagging it, not getting it, and in the first 15 minutes I was fine. But then I got so tired, man, my eyes were starting to not focus on the road. I said, I got to do something. So up ahead was a Choctaw casino in I forget. Anyway, it's on the road to Paris. And they have a gas station and a quickie mart there. So I walked in there, and they had hot food. I really wanted chicken strips. I was really hoping chicken strips, but no. But they had hot food there. But I looked at it and I think, okay, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and it's full. How long has that food been sitting there? I'm flashing back to Beavis and Butthead nachos, right? Gas station nachos. I just couldn't eat it. So I walked over, and I got a big cup of Diet Coke, and caramel bugles. Oh man, these are my favorite. If you have never had caramel bugles, if you like bugles and you like caramel, these will be your new favorite. Trust me. Now, I can't find them in grocery stores. You can only find them in gas stations. But they had them, and I got them. Now, you see the little holes there, the bugles? Every once in a while, you're lucky, and that'll be filled with crunchy, caramely goodness. So, I munched on these all the way home and drank my Diet Coke, and we made it back to the house. I got her in, laid her down. And this morning, she got up. She's out there right now. She's using a walker, because we had a walker from when her husband, Ralph, was alive near the end of his life, and he had walkers and wheelchairs, so we have all that here. But she's a little unsteady, but I think that's mainly from her ordeal and loss of blood and not eating well yesterday and lack of sleep, because she only got about half of what she would normally sleep. So, and she's 81, so everything hits you harder when you're 81. If you've got an older person in your life that's over 80, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But right now, she's out there. She had her breakfast. She made her coffee. She's using a walker, but she gets around very well. And I figure by tomorrow, she will probably won't need that. Anyway, that's my story. And I'm starving. And I'm out in the middle of nowhere. There's no food. So I'm going to make me some scrambled eggs and toast and enjoy myself. And let's hope today will be a better day. And I'll probably take a nap later, too. Sorry for rambling on again, but that's my story, and I just wanted to tell it. Y'all take care. Oh, and if you're still with me, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad someone finds me interesting. Y'all take care.